I heard my children dividing up my life before I was even gone. Jason can take the house, my daughter said. Vanessa wants the jewelry, my son replied. And we should probably sell Mom's car before it loses more value. I stood frozen in the hallway outside my own kitchen, one hand wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, listening to my children discuss my belongings as casually as if they were planning a weekend yard sale. I'm Eleanor Brooks. I'm 71 years old, a widow, and until that moment, I believe my family still saw me as their mother. The clock above the stove read 9:17 p.m. I remember because I stared at it while their voices drifted through the partially closed kitchen door. My tea slowly cooled in my hands. I didn't move. I barely breathed. Earlier that evening, I had hosted what I thought was a pleasant family dinner. Jason had complimented my meatloaf. Courtney had asked about a recipe she remembered from childhood. Vanessa had hugged me before dessert and told me I looked wonderful. Looking back, every smile felt rehearsed. Every kind word sounded different now. I had gone upstairs after dinner to put away some photo albums. A few minutes later, I realized I had left my tea mug in the living room and headed back downstairs. That simple decision changed everything. The house alone is worth over $600,000, Courtney said. If Mom ever decides to move, we need to make sure things stay fair. Fair. The word nearly made me laugh. They weren't discussing possibilities. They were assigning ownership. Jason lowered his voice, but I still heard him. Mom won't be around forever. We should be prepared. Silence followed. Then Vanessa spoke. Honestly, she doesn't need all that space anymore. A retirement community would probably be better for her. The mug trembled slightly in my hands. Not enough to spill, but enough for me to notice. My late husband, Robert, and I had spent 36 years building that house. We planted every tree in the backyard ourselves. We painted the bedrooms when the children were small. We celebrated birthdays, graduations, anniversaries, and holidays under that roof. To me, it was a lifetime of memories. To them, it sounded like an asset sheet. I wanted to walk into the kitchen and demand an explanation. I wanted to ask how long they had been having these conversations. I wanted to know when concern became calculation. But I didn't. Instead, I quietly stepped backward. One step, then another. Their voices faded as I returned to the staircase. No one noticed me. No one knew I had heard a single word. Back in my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at a framed photograph of Robert smiling beside our garden. The room felt strangely unfamiliar, as if the walls themselves had shifted. For the first time since losing my husband 3 years earlier, I felt truly alone. Not because I had no family, because I suddenly realized I might not have the family I thought I had. Downstairs, I could still hear faint laughter from the kitchen. They sounded comfortable, relaxed, certain. They believed they were planning for a future that belonged to them. What they didn't know was that the woman they thought was unaware had heard every word. And as I sat there in the quiet of my room, staring at the photograph beside my bed, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. First, I was going to learn exactly how much of my life they had already divided up without me. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, something I had done almost every day since Robert passed away. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that usually brought me comfort. That morning, it felt different. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and watched the first light spread across the backyard. The oak tree Robert planted 20 years ago stood exactly where it always had. The bird feeder still hung beside the fence. Nothing had changed, yet everything felt altered. I kept hearing their voices from the night before. Not the exact words anymore, but the certainty behind them. They had spoken as though decisions about my future were already being made, as though I were no longer the person in charge of my own life. When Jason arrived later that morning, he greeted me with the same easy smile he had worn for years. He kissed my cheek and asked how I was feeling. I studied his face. For a moment, if I had not heard that conversation, I would have thought nothing of it. I would have believed every word. "I am doing fine," I said. "Just taking things one day at a time." He nodded sympathetically. "That is good, Mom. You should not worry about anything. We are all here for you." We. The word lingered in my mind long after he left the room. Throughout the day, small memories began resurfacing. Things I had dismissed before. Things that suddenly seemed important. 6 months earlier, Courtney had casually asked whether I still kept copies of my financial records in the home office. At the time, I assumed she was concerned about organization. A year before that, Jason had offered to help me review my insurance policies. He said he wanted to make sure I was protected. Vanessa had repeatedly suggested simplifying my life, downsizing, selling and used belongings, moving somewhere easier to manage. Each conversation had sounded reasonable on its own. Together, they formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. That afternoon, I walked through the house room by room. The living room, the dining room, the guest bedroom. I found myself looking at everything through a different lens. The antique clock Robert inherited from his father. The china cabinet my mother gave me. The photographs lining the hallway. To me, they were pieces of a life. To someone else, perhaps they were simply items with a price tag attached. The realization hurt more than I wanted to admit. Not because of the possessions themselves, but because of what they represented. I had spent decades building a family. I believed the memories mattered more than the things. Yet somewhere along the way, it seemed the things had become the focus. Late that evening, I opened a drawer in my desk and removed a folder containing copies of important documents. Property records, bank information, estate planning papers. Robert always believed in staying organized. Hope for the best, he used to say, but prepare for reality. For the first time, I understood exactly what he meant. As I reviewed the documents, I noticed something that made me pause. Several months earlier, someone had accessed information related to my estate plan. The request had been documented by the attorney's office. I stared at the notation for a long moment. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe there was not. Either way, I knew one thing for certain. Before making any decisions, I needed answers. And this time, I was going to find them myself. The following morning, I called the attorney's office as soon as they opened. My voice sounded calm, even to me. Years of raising children had taught me how to keep my emotions hidden when necessary. The receptionist transferred me to Daniel Harper, the lawyer who had worked with Robert and me for more than a decade. He remembered me immediately. After exchanging a few pleasantries, I asked a simple question. Has anyone requested information about my estate plan recently? There was a brief pause on the line. Not an uncomfortable pause. The kind that happens when someone is checking records. I listened to the faint clicking of a keyboard. Then Daniel spoke carefully. There was an inquiry several months ago regarding general estate procedures. No confidential information was released. His answer was professional, but it was enough. Someone had been asking questions. Someone had been thinking ahead. After I thanked him and ended the call, I sat quietly in my home office. The room overlooked the backyard. Robert used to spend Saturday mornings tending the flower beds outside the window. I could almost picture him there, kneeling beside the roses, wearing the old baseball cap he refused to replace. When grief first arrived after his passing, every memory felt like a wound. Over time, those memories became a comfort. Now they felt like warnings I had ignored. Robert had always been observant. He noticed small changes in people long before anyone else did. I remembered one conversation from years ago. Jason and Vanessa had just purchased their first house. During dinner, Jason spent nearly an hour discussing property values, investment returns, and future inheritance trends. At the time, I thought he was simply interested in financial planning. Robert seemed less impressed. Later that night, he told me, "Money changes the way some people see the world." I laughed and told him he worried too much. Sitting there in my office years later, I wished I had listened more carefully. That afternoon, Courtney stopped by unexpectedly. She carried a container of homemade soup and wore her usual cheerful expression. "I was worried about you," she said. "You have seemed distracted lately." I smiled and invited her inside. We sat together at the kitchen table, the same table where I had overheard the conversation only days before. She asked about my health, my sleeping habits, whether I was keeping up with my doctor appointments. The questions sounded caring on the surface, yet I noticed something different now. Every concern eventually drifted toward the future. Had I considered moving closer to family? Was the house becoming difficult to maintain? Did I still drive long distances alone? The pattern was subtle, almost invisible, but once I saw it, I could not unsee it. I answered politely while watching her reactions. By the time she left, I felt more certain than ever that something larger was happening beneath the surface. That evening, I opened an old photo album and slowly turned the pages. There was Jason at age 8 holding a fishing rod, Courtney smiling in her high school graduation gown, family vacations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. Looking at those photographs, I searched for the moment everything changed. I never found one. Perhaps there was no single moment. Perhaps it happened gradually, one small compromise at a time, one quiet assumption after another. As darkness settled outside, I closed the album and stared across the room. For the first time since overhearing that conversation, a clear thought settled in my mind. If my children believed they understood everything about my future, they were about to discover how much they did not know. 2 days later, I drove across town to meet Daniel Harper in person. His office sat in a quiet brick building near the courthouse, the same place Robert and I had visited several times over the years. Walking through those familiar doors brought back memories I had not expected. Robert always handled meetings like these with calm confidence. He believed preparation solved problems before they became crises. As I settled into the chair across from Daniel's desk, I realized I was finally following the example he had set. Daniel greeted me warmly and asked how I had been managing. I told him the truth, though not all of it. I explained that I wanted to review every detail of my estate plan, property records, beneficiary designations, and legal protections. He seemed slightly surprised by my sudden interest, but did not question it. For nearly 2 hours, we went through document after document. The deeper we looked, the more I understood how vulnerable people can become when they assume trust will always be enough. My will had not been updated since shortly after Robert's passing. Several financial accounts still reflected decisions made years earlier. Nothing was wrong. Nothing was urgent. Yet I could see how easily assumptions could become problems. Daniel pointed out areas where additional protections might be wise. He discussed options that would allow me to maintain full control while ensuring my wishes were followed exactly as intended. I listened carefully and took notes. By the end of the meeting, I felt something I had not felt in days. Clarity. As I prepared to leave, Daniel hesitated before speaking. "Eleanor, I hope you do not mind me mentioning this, but there have been a few inquiries over the past year from family members asking general questions about estate administration." His tone remained professional. No confidential information was ever provided. I nodded slowly. The confirmation did not shock me anymore. In a strange way, it brought relief. Doubt can be exhausting. Certainty, even painful certainty, is easier to face. On the drive home, I found myself paying attention to details I usually ignored. The rows of maple trees lining the road, the small diner Robert loved, the church where our family attended holiday services for decades. Life continued exactly as it always had. The difference was that I was finally seeing my situation clearly. That evening, Jason called. His voice sounded unusually cheerful. He asked if I wanted help with a few projects around the house. He offered to organize the garage and review some paperwork. A month earlier, I would have been grateful. Now I heard the offer differently. Not because the words themselves had changed, but because I understood the context surrounding them. I thanked him and said I had everything under control. There was a brief silence on the line before he quickly changed the subject. After we hung up, I walked through the house once more. This time, I was not remembering the past. I was evaluating the present. The locks, the security system, the filing cabinets, the documents stored in my office. For years, this house had represented comfort and family. Now it represented responsibility. Before going to bed, I made a short list on a yellow legal pad. It contained only 3 items. Review access, update protections, stay silent. I placed the list inside my desk drawer and turned off the lamp. Somewhere in the darkness of that quiet house, a plan had begun to take shape. And for the first time since that night in the kitchen, I felt as though I was no longer reacting to events. I was preparing for them. The following Monday, I began putting my plan into motion. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone would notice. That was the advantage of being underestimated. People often assume that quiet means unaware. They mistake patience for weakness. I had spent most of my life letting others speak first. Now that habit was working in my favor. At 8 o'clock that morning, a locksmith's truck pulled into my driveway. The appointment had taken less than 10 minutes to schedule. The technician was polite, efficient, and asked very few questions. By noon, every exterior lock on the house had been replaced. The garage access code had been updated. New keys rested inside my purse. As I watched the technician drive away, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. It was not about the locks themselves. It was about control. For the first time in weeks, I felt as though I was protecting something rather than defending it. That afternoon, I reviewed every account I owned. Savings, investments, insurance records, retirement funds. Nothing unusual appeared, but I changed passwords anyway. I updated security settings and removed outdated access permissions that no longer served any purpose. The process took hours. By the end of the day, I was exhausted. Yet it was the kind of exhaustion that comes from solving problems instead of worrying about them. 2 days later, Vanessa stopped by carrying a bakery box filled with pastries. She smiled warmly as she stepped into the kitchen. "I thought you might enjoy these," she said. I thanked her and poured coffee for both of us. For a while, the conversation remained harmless. Neighborhood news, family updates, a new restaurant that had opened across town. Then, almost casually, she asked whether I had considered making life easier for myself. I knew exactly what she meant before she explained. She spoke about retirement communities with fitness centers, organized activities, transportation services, and maintenance-free living. Her presentation sounded polished. Practiced. She described it as freedom, simplicity, convenience. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I smiled and told her I appreciated the suggestion. The brief disappointment that crossed her face lasted less than a second. Most people would have missed it. I did not. After she left, I stood at the kitchen sink looking out toward the backyard. Robert had always loved that view. In the spring, sunlight filtered through the trees and painted shifting patterns across the grass. In autumn, the leaves turned shades of gold and crimson. Every season carried memories. Every corner of the property held a story. The idea that someone else viewed it merely as real estate no longer saddened me. Instead, it clarified things. Value means different things to different people. To me, this house represented a lifetime. To others, it represented opportunity. Later that evening, Jason called. He sounded unusually curious. He asked whether everything was all right because he had tried using the garage keypad earlier and it no longer worked. I calmly explained that I had upgraded the security system and changed several access codes. A short silence followed. Then he laughed. "Well, that explains it." His tone remained light, but something beneath it had shifted. I noticed it. Immediately, for the first time since overhearing that conversation, I felt the balance beginning to change. They still believed they understood the situation. They still assumed the future was moving in a direction they could predict. What they did not realize was that every day, every conversation, every small reaction was teaching me more than they intended. And with each passing day, the picture became clearer. Over the next 2 weeks, I settled into a routine that looked completely ordinary from the outside. I attended church on Sundays. I met friends for coffee. I tended my garden and kept up with the endless little chores that come with maintaining a house. If anyone had been watching, they would have seen the same Eleanor Brooks they had always known. That was exactly what I wanted. The less attention I drew to myself, the more people revealed. Jason called more often than usual. Sometimes he asked about my health. Other times he wanted to know whether I had made any decisions about the future. Had I thought about downsizing? Was I still comfortable managing the property alone? Did I ever feel overwhelmed by all the responsibility? His questions always arrived wrapped in concern. The wording was careful. The tone was warm. Yet I noticed something important. None of the conversations focused on what I wanted. They focused on what I might eventually leave behind. Courtney became increasingly attentive as well. She stopped by with groceries twice in 1 week. She offered to help organize old files in my office. She even suggested creating a detailed inventory of household belongings, just in case something ever happened. I smiled and thanked her. Then I quietly declined. Each refusal was met with a brief flash of disappointment before her pleasant expression returned. The pattern had become impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, I continued gathering information. Not evidence of wrongdoing. There was none. What I was collecting were moments, reactions, small pieces of behavior that revealed more than words ever could. I began keeping notes in a notebook stored inside my desk drawer. Dates, conversations, suggestions, questions. Nothing dramatic, just observations. The more I recorded, the clearer everything became. One Friday afternoon, Vanessa invited me to lunch at a restaurant overlooking the river. She spent most of the meal discussing retirement communities again. This time she brought brochures. Glossy photographs showed smiling residents playing cards, attending fitness classes, and enjoying group activities. The facilities looked pleasant enough. There was nothing wrong with them. But that was not the point. What caught my attention was how often she referred to my house afterward. "Imagine how much simpler life would be without all that maintenance," she said. "You could sell while the market is still strong." So, there it was again, always circling back to the same destination. I nodded thoughtfully and changed the subject. By then, I had learned something valuable. People often reveal their priorities when they believe they are being patient. A few days later, I hosted a small family barbecue in my backyard. Nothing unusual, just hamburgers, iced tea, and a warm Saturday afternoon. As everyone gathered around the patio table, I watched them interact. Jason discussing home values with a neighbor, Courtney asking questions about renovation costs, Vanessa commenting on how desirable certain properties had become in the area. None of it sounded suspicious on its own. Yet together, the conversations painted a picture I could not ignore. Late that evening, after everyone left, I sat alone on the back porch. The air was cool and the neighborhood had grown quiet. I looked across the yard toward the old oak tree Robert planted years ago. For the first time, I no longer felt hurt by what I had discovered. The sadness was fading. In its place came something steadier. Understanding. I finally saw the situation for what it was. My children believed they were being subtle. They believed they were waiting patiently. What they did not realize was that every conversation, every suggestion, and every carefully chosen question had answered one of my own. And the answers were leading me toward a decision that would surprise all of them. 3 days later, I made a phone call that would quietly set the next stage of my plan into motion. I invited Jason, Courtney, and Vanessa to dinner the following Saturday evening. Nothing about the invitation sounded unusual. In fact, I made sure it sounded completely ordinary. I told them I missed spending time together and wanted a proper family meal. All three accepted almost immediately. Their enthusiasm did not surprise me. Over the previous weeks, I had noticed how eager they had become whenever conversations drifted toward the future. As Saturday approached, I prepared carefully, not because I was nervous, but because details matter. Robert used to say that people reveal themselves most clearly when they believe they are getting exactly what they want. I spent the afternoon cooking several family favorites, the same recipes that had appeared at birthdays, holidays, and countless Sunday dinners over the years. By 6 o'clock, the dining room was ready. The table was set. Candles glowed softly in the center. Everything looked warm and familiar. When the doorbell rang, I felt surprisingly calm. Jason arrived first. Courtney followed shortly afterward. Vanessa entered carrying a pie and her usual bright smile. Anyone looking at us would have seen a perfectly normal family gathering. We exchanged hugs. We shared stories. We laughed over old memories. Yet beneath the surface, I noticed something else. Anticipation. It appeared in brief glances, in carefully timed questions, in moments that lasted only seconds. During dinner, Jason asked whether I had been feeling better lately. Courtney wondered if I had made any new plans for the house. Vanessa casually mentioned a friend whose mother had recently moved into a retirement community and absolutely loved it. I listened politely while keeping my own thoughts hidden. For most of the evening, I allowed the conversation to flow naturally. Then, as dessert plates were being cleared away, I decided it was time. I set down my coffee cup and smiled. "There is something important I have been thinking about recently," I said. The effect was immediate. The room grew noticeably quieter. Jason leaned forward slightly. Courtney's attention sharpened. Even Vanessa seemed unusually focused. No one interrupted. "Over the past few months," I continued, "I have spent a great deal of time considering my future and making sure everything is properly organized." The reaction was subtle but unmistakable. I could almost see their expectations forming. They believed they knew where this conversation was headed. That assumption worked in my favor. I paused long enough for curiosity to grow. Then I added, "Because of that, I have invited someone to join us this evening." 3 expressions changed at once. Not dramatically, just enough. Confusion replaced confidence. Jason glanced toward the front hallway. Courtney looked at me as if trying to determine whether she had missed something important. Vanessa remained perfectly still. At that exact moment, the doorbell rang. I stood and walked calmly toward the front entrance. My heartbeat remained steady. Every step felt deliberate. When I opened the door, Daniel Harper greeted me with a polite smile and a leather portfolio tucked beneath his arm. I invited him inside and led him toward the dining room. The moment he entered, silence settled over the table. No one spoke. No one seemed quite sure what to say. As I returned to my seat, I looked around the room at the faces of the people I loved. Then I folded my hands in front of me and prepared to begin a conversation none of them had expected. Daniel placed his portfolio on the dining room table and greeted everyone politely before taking a seat beside me. The atmosphere had changed completely. Only minutes earlier, the room had been filled with casual conversation and familiar laughter. Now a quiet tension lingered beneath the surface. Jason attempted a smile. Courtney folded her hands together. Vanessa watched carefully without saying a word. I took a sip of coffee before speaking. I appreciate all of you being here tonight, I said. Over the last several months, I have spent a great deal of time reviewing my plans and thinking about the future. Nobody interrupted. The silence itself felt revealing. Daniel opened his portfolio and removed several documents. The sound of paper sliding across the table seemed unusually loud. Mrs. Brooks recently completed a comprehensive review of her estate planning documents, he explained. His voice remained calm and professional. Part of that review involved updating certain provisions to ensure her wishes are carried out exactly as intended. Jason shifted slightly in his chair. Courtney glanced toward him before quickly looking away. Vanessa remained focused on Daniel. He continued speaking. The updated structure places all major decisions under Mrs. Brooks's direct control for as long as she chooses. Additionally, several new safeguards have been added regarding future distributions and property management. The room grew even quieter. I could almost feel everyone processing the information. They had expected news, just not this kind of news. Daniel carefully explained that the house would remain under my sole authority. Financial accounts would continue operating according to revised instructions. Any future transfers would occur only under conditions I personally established. Everything was perfectly legal, perfectly reasonable. Yet the reactions around the table suggested something else entirely. Surprise, disappointment, confusion. Jason cleared his throat. Mom, nobody was questioning your control over anything. His words sounded measured, almost rehearsed. I smiled gently. I know. And in that moment, I truly did know. This was no longer about proving anything. It was about clarity. Daniel continued reviewing the updated arrangements. Certain charitable commitments had been added. Several organizations Robert and I supported would now receive funding in the future. Educational scholarships had also been included. Those decisions reflected values that mattered deeply to us. As Daniel described the changes, I noticed something fascinating. Not one person asked about the charities. Not one person commented on the scholarships. Their attention remained fixed on the portions involving property and assets. Eventually, Daniel finished his summary and closed the portfolio. The room sat in silence for several seconds. Then Courtney spoke. This seems like a lot of changes all at once. Her tone remained polite, but uncertainty lingered beneath the words. I nodded. Perhaps. But life has a way of reminding us when something needs attention. No one responded. I looked around the table at my family, the people I had loved, supported, and trusted for decades. For a brief moment, I considered saying nothing more. I could have ended the evening right there. The documents had already accomplished their purpose, but some truths deserve daylight. I folded my hands together and met each pair of eyes in turn. There is one more thing you should know, I said quietly. The expressions around the table sharpened immediately. Several weeks ago, I overheard a conversation in this kitchen. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the air seemed still. I heard discussions about my house, my belongings, my accounts, and my future. Jason's face lost color. Courtney stared at the table. Vanessa looked completely frozen. I continued speaking calmly. You were making plans for things that still belong to me. The silence that followed felt different from every silence before it. This one carried understanding. Because for the first time, everyone in the room realized exactly why Daniel Harper had been invited to dinner. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The silence that filled the dining room was unlike any silence I had ever experienced. It was not uncomfortable because people lacked words. It was uncomfortable because everyone suddenly understood that the truth was sitting at the table with us. Jason looked down at his hands. Courtney stared at the untouched coffee in front of her. Vanessa remained perfectly still. Daniel sat quietly beside me, allowing the moment to unfold on its own. Finally, Jason broke the silence. Mom, it was not what it sounded like. His voice was softer than I had expected. There was no anger in it, only uncertainty. I nodded slowly. Perhaps not, I said, but I heard enough. No one argued. No one rushed to explain. That alone told me more than any explanation could have. I was not interested in humiliating anyone. I was not interested in winning an argument. The purpose of this evening had never been revenge. It was about honesty, something our family had been missing for a long time. Courtney's eyes filled with tears. "We were talking about possibilities," she said quietly. "We were not wishing anything bad would happen." I believed her, at least partly. Human beings are complicated. Love and self-interest can exist in the same heart. Concern and greed can sometimes occupy the same conversation. The problem was not that they had discussed the future. The problem was how easily they had forgotten I was still living in the present. I looked around the table and took a slow breath. "Do you know what hurt the most?" I asked. It was not the discussion about money. It was hearing my life reduced to numbers. Nobody looked at me. "This house is where your father taught you how to ride a bicycle. It is where we celebrated birthdays, graduations, and holidays. It is where I sat beside him during some of the hardest days of our lives." When I heard that conversation, I realized those memories and those walls meant very different things to each of us. Tears rolled down Courtney's cheeks. Jason looked exhausted. Vanessa finally lowered her gaze. For the first time in weeks, I felt no anger toward any of them. Anger requires energy. What I felt instead was clarity, the kind that comes when confusion finally disappears. Daniel quietly gathered his documents and prepared to leave. Before he stood, he placed a hand gently on the table and wished everyone a good evening. After he departed, the four of us remained seated together. No one seemed eager to leave. Eventually, I spoke again. Everything I changed was done for one reason. I needed to know that my future remained my decision. Jason nodded slowly. I understand that now. Whether he truly did or not was something only time would reveal. But for the first time, I sensed genuine reflection instead of expectation. An hour later, after everyone had gone home, I walked through the house alone. The rooms were quiet. The dishes had been cleaned. The candles had burned low. Outside, the old oak tree stood beneath the moonlight exactly as it always had. I paused by the living room window and looked across the yard. Weeks earlier, I had felt betrayed, confused, and heartbroken. Now I felt something entirely different. Peace. Not because everything had been repaired. Some things take time. Not because I had defeated anyone. Families are not competitions. I felt peace because I had reclaimed something important. My voice. My choices. My place in my own story. For too long, other people had been quietly planning my future. That chapter was over. Whatever came next would happen on my terms. And as I stood there looking out at the home Robert and I built together, I realized that was worth far more than any inheritance ever could be.